ISIS of a caliphate or Islamic State under the leadership of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi has renewed what is an age-old debate about territorial boundaries in Iraq and the Levant region. Now, the current lines in the sand, largely drawn by a pair of European diplomats, Mark Sykes and Francois Georges Picot, almost a century ago, 1916, but drawing new lines would spark a whole new set of issues. That, at least, is the argument of our regular guest, Faisal Al Yafai, chief columnist at the national newspaper, who is here with me to explain. The countries that we know of in the Middle East, Iraq, Jordan, Syria, in the Levant here, drawn, as I suggested, in 1916 by this Sykes-Picot Act. You say don't mess around with that. Why?
Well, these lines have served the Middle East well. They weren't perfect. Look, the lines that Sykes-Picot drew were done over the heads of the people. It had nothing to do with the people on the ground. And here's one example of that. Mosul, a city in the west of Iraq today, was originally going to be in Syria. The British wanted it because of the oil fields, took it from the French mandate in Syria and put it into Iraq. And here we are a century later, and Mosul is an integral part of the Iraqi state. The problem is that if you start to move around these pieces today, while half of the region is on fire, while the civil war in Syria is raging, you could have a conflagration that would last for a generation.
Let me remind our viewers, so that they are aware again of just how sort of the land lies here. There are more than 20 million Shia Muslims living in Iraq. That's about two-thirds of the population. Take a look, for example, at this map. Shiites, shown here in blue, live mainly in the southern part of the country. Sunnis populate the west, and Kurds live mainly in the north. But central and southwest Iraq is a mix of Shia and Sunni Muslims, and the blue and orange shaded areas there you see. There's also a mix of Sunnis and Kurds in the north, shown here in yellow and in orange. It's clear that the fragmentation of Iraq is a possibility, at least going forward. Whether that is by default or by design, what would the consequences be?
Well, look at that map and you can see clearly what the consequences would be. The problem with Iraq is that these neat lines that we talk about don't exist in reality. People are married into each other. People live amongst each other. The Sunnis and the Shias exist together. The Kurds and the Arabs are married into each other. How do you say to one family with a Sunni mother, a Shia father, where are these people going to live? You are going to start to make millions and millions of people homeless, on the move, mass migrations. And this is going to be an utterly chaotic state of affairs.
What's the history of attempts by Arab nations to get more cohesive?
It's not good. I mean, since the caliphate ended in 1924 and the Ottoman Empire collapsed, there have been various attempts. The most successful, of course, was during the reign of Abdel Nasser in Egypt, where they tried to have the United Arab Republic, bringing together the Egyptians and the Iraqis, and the Syrians. And that didn't work very well. Actually, it sparked off a whole generation of upheaval, political upheaval. I think at the moment, while the lines of Sykes-Picot have not been very good, they are the best for the moment that there is.
Back to Sykes-Picot, if you will, Faisal, because colonial powers may not be responsible for setting the Middle East ablaze, as it were, at present. But the way the region was carved up was clearly designed to European interests, not to local ones. Now, again, we're talking 100 years ago. Your conceit, your argument today is don't muck around with them because it's about as good as it gets at the moment, and it could be a lot worse, correct?
Well, it could be a lot better.
I think people locally don't feel that way, though.
The difficulty is that now is not the moment to have this conversation. By all means, let's have a conversation about the lines in the Arab world and so forth. Absolutely. But Syria is still on fire. Iraq is still a problem. Look at what's happening in Gaza. This is not the moment now to start fiddling with lines. What needs to happen is that the policies need to get fixed. And then we can talk about the leadership. Take one example. If you say that Syria and Iraq are going to be one country, that's going to be a majority Sunni state. Who's going to rule it? Bashar al-Assad, who's murdering his Sunni population, or Maliki with a nakedly sectarian agenda? It sounds like an impossible scenario.
With that, we're going to leave it there. Always good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Faisal Al Yafai, you can read his opinion piece, his op-ed on the front page of CNN.com/international. Fascinating stuff. So what do you think about his viewpoint? There it is on the front page. Is a unified Iraq the best way forward? CNN.com/international.